Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We'll just give people about 1 minute to join. Thank you for joining today. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Venezuela Solidarity Network webinar and online picket, as well as an opportunity to become updated about U.S. sanctions on Venezuela and the people of Venezuela's response. I'm looking forward to today's discussion, but before we really begin, I want to share instructions regarding our Zoom interpretation. Because today is going to be both fully in English and in Spanish. One of our speakers will speak in English and one in Spanish. So you can see on the screen the way to turn on simultaneous interpretation. You can find the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen and select your preferred language. If you are on a cellular device, it might be under the 3 dots. And I suggest using the option to mute original audio for a clearer sound. Para activar la interpretación simultánea, busque el icono de globo, terraqueo en la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom y seleccione su idioma preferido. Si está conectada desde un móvil, necesita seleccionar más para encontrar el icono de globo. Y si tiene preguntas, estaremos sugiriendo pasos para resolver problemas en el chat. Avísanos y gracias para tu participación. So with interpretation instructions out of the way, we can formally start our webinar and online picket today. Today is the monthly webinar and online picket of the Venezuela Solidarity Network, titled Unilateral Coercive Measures and the Renewed, quote, Maximum Pressure Campaign on Venezuela, Challenges and Resistance. My name is Alison Bodine, and I am the coordinator of Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice, Venezuela Solidarity Campaign here in Vancouver, Canada, and author of the book Revolution and Counter-Revolution in Venezuela from Battle of Ideas Press. I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking from the unceded and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And as we defend Venezuela's right to self-determination, we also stand with Indigenous nations across Turtle Island and around the world and defend their right to self-determination. If people would like to take a minute to acknowledge where they may be joining us from, you're very much welcome and encouraged to do so. As we speak today, we are within, of course, just the first initial months of the Trump presidency in the United States, which has on top of mind for most people that are following the politics of U.S. imperialism and the United States attacks on poor working and oppressed people within the United States and around the world, including this so-called maximum pressure campaign and its various machinations applied against Venezuela and the possibilities forward, but also following very closely people's resistance. And this includes the organizing taking place in defense of migrants, specifically in the context of our conversation, Venezuelan migrants in the United States who are under attack by the Trump administration, which has brutally deported Venezuelan migrants, especially as is discussed recently, to El Salvador, which I'm sure will come up in our discussion today, and then also the resistance of people in Venezuela. So we have 2 very distinguished guests and thinkers with us here today who are very close to what is happening in Venezuela when it comes to responding to the unilateral coercive measures or sanctions applied by the United States and other forms of US pressure to try and really strangle the people of Venezuela into overthrowing their government and President Nicolas Maduro and the Bolivarian revolutionary process. We have with us Yosmer Arellán, who is an economic advisor and academic collaborator of the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Negative Impacts of Unilateral Coercive Measures, Alenda Douhan, for people that are familiar, and Cira Pascual Marquina, who is here from Venezuelanalysis. I'll explain more about their full bios when we introduce them, but it's really my pleasure to be able to host this conversation here today and welcome all of you. Today is brought to you by not only the Venezuela Solidarity Network, but the action is also co-hosted by Americas Without Sanctions and Venezuelanalysis. We'll put more information about these campaigns in the chat and organizations. And the Venezuela Solidarity Network, just to say, is a continuation and is doing these webinars as a continuation of actions that took place organized in solidarity with Venezuela online monthly for the past 3 years. And for about the past year, the Venezuela Solidarity Network, which is a new network of North America-wide organizations mostly, organizing in defense of Venezuela's sovereignty and self-determination, has organized these monthly pickets and webinars alongside releasing open letters and statements, monthly regular meetings where we're able to discuss the politics of US intervention in Venezuela and what's happening in Venezuela today, and hopefully many more actions to come, including street actions. We'll put a link in the chat of how you can join the Venezuela Solidarity Network. But without further ado, I will get ready to introduce our speakers. If you have questions or comments, I would suggest using the Q&A box for questions, but I believe the chat is open if you'd like to participate in the webinar through the chat. Again, it'd be great to hear where you're joining us here from today. And today's webinar is also being recorded, so if you know folks that weren't able to make it, you can send them the link later. And I think that's it for kind of the housekeeping items. We're going to start today's program with Yosmer, who is joining us directly. Actually, both of our speakers are direct from Venezuela. Yosmer Arellán is, as I mentioned, an academic collaborator of the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Impact of Unilateral Coercive Measures, Alena Douhan. Yosmer has 25 years of experience in responsibilities and advice on economics and finances for the Venezuelan state. And within the Bolivarian Revolution, he specializes in policy design and the execution of credit, budgeting, and strategic planning, as well as financial risk management, project evaluation, and the development of mathematical and statistical risk estimation models, of which you can imagine have been greatly impacted by the unilateral coercive measures. He is the research team coordinator for the study of the impact of the unilateral coercive measures, as we call them colloquially, sanctions, on Venezuela's economy. And this is the second time, actually, the Venezuela Solidarity Network has had the honor of having Yosmer join us and give us some of the detailed information that he has about Venezuela's response to the sanctions. We're at a time under a Trump presidency when the oil sanctions have to some extent been reapplied. So Yosmer, I will pass you the microphone. I do have some slides that I know you sent to us. So just let me know when you want me to put the slides on the screen to describe some of what you're speaking about. And the floor is all of yours. It's a pleasure. Thank you for joining.
Hello, good evening. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alison, and thank you very much to the Solidarity Network for Venezuela. Thank you all. Thank you to all the participants. This space is very important. It's very valuable. It's the second time that I'm here. Thank you very much for calling me to be here and taking me into account because, What I want to do most, I want to defend Venezuela with my word, with the truth, and with science, with academics and scholarly work. It seems they want to think that we do not study what they have done to us, and we do that. We create data about this, and we are showing that this year's inflation in 2024 was a two-digit inflation, when the inflation provoked or caused by the coercive measures was a six-digit inflation. First of all, I wanted to clarify that I have just left my position as director of the central bank. I was a member of the board of the central bank up until 1 month ago, since 2018. It was 7 years of the 10 in this institute that issued Venezuela's currency. And all of these years have given me a lot of experience, so that have brought the economy of Venezuela to an unprecedented level of stability. Nobody thought that we were going to achieve this. They actually they wanted the people to react negatively, and the maximum pressure that has been applied on us in the last years was targeted directly at creating a change in government, at causing or provoking one. But this did not happen. We have lived very dramatic times, though. We have had to queue for gas. We have had to stand in line for bread, for vaccines. We have gone through very serious, very dire times, very dramatic times. But this people is made up of the blood of this person here that you can see in the painting. This is a Bolivarian people. This is a warrior, a people of warrior and independent people. And our people stood upon the legacy of Chavez as well to resist. Just like the title of the webinar says, it talks about the resistance of the Venezuelan people, which is extraordinary. This is a people that does not give up. It's a magnificent people, heroic. I'm going to give you a first figure. Can you hear me correctly?
Yes.
How much time do I have?
15 minutos. 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Just a first figure. I'm sorry, the sound is breaking up. After the year 2014, up until 2019, approximately, there was a 35%, not even the countries who were bombed in the second countries that were bombed, like Greece, for example. Imagine this, how strong these sanctions were. They can be summarized in two big moments. The first one that has to do with increasing the country's risk and hindering foreign investment. Foreign markets are closed, and Venezuela cannot compensate for the drop in the price of oil in 2014. Somebody argued once, and now I'm going to show you a graph about this. There's a graph about oil production. Alison, if you can bring it up, please. The graph that says the counterfactual of oil production.
That graph, the red line is the oil revenue, and the green line is the counterfactual one that I constructed. According to our production and relative to that of other countries, I constructed a line that you can see, for example, from 2010 to 2016 is very similar. So that means that I recreated the production of our country well for those years. But then starting 2017, the green line, as you can see from there, that's Venezuela without sanctions. The red one is Venezuela with sanctions. The difference is around 2 million barrels a day. You can see at the top, there's a $300 million loss of revenue. Can you imagine this? So he's got very bad connection. It's more than for sorry, the sound is terrible.
Yosmer, your signal is breaking up. Ha perdido su señal. Quizás podemos apagar su cámara.
Can you hear me? Hello, hello?
Yes, now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, now.
All right, I'll go somewhere else to have a better signal. Okay, so the other graph, which talks about the GDP, can you show that, please? It's the counterfactual GDP. That's right. No, sorry, the previous one. That one, exactly. You can see there in this graph, the GDP, the same counterfactual GDP, green shows Venezuela without sanctions and red is with sanctions. Have a look at the behavior from 2004 after the oil strike up until 2013. We're talking about growth that these are numbers that are coming from the International Monetary Fund. This is not Venezuelan data. We're talking about $64 million, and then it goes to what we're showing here is that this is a successful model. Obviously, we had to stop this successful model because it couldn't be a model for the world of how to do things. What we see then, the difference between the green and the red line after 2013, we're talking about a loss of revenue of $1.154 billion. In English, this would be trillion. So we're talking about an exorbitant loss of revenue as a product of sanctions. We're talking about $347 million. That affects social variables. How do we measure that? Let's see the index of social human development in the next graph. these use, can you please show the next graph with the index of human development? Right, so that index is there, you can see it. Venezuela in between 1990 and 2013. I'm losing him again. It goes in 2003 from 069, which reflects middle class, to 077, which is a high index. Why am I talking about only until 2013? That's because that's the year the sanctions were imposed. It is from 2014 when the US says that we are a threat. We've lived through 4 US administrations: Obama, Biden, Trump, and now the second Trump. If we go to the next slide, we'll see a counterfactual index compared to other countries. See what happens. Take a look at the difference. After 2014, we should be in 078. That's where we should be, but have a look at how far down it went. And that index, as I said, measures 3 things: the life expectancy, education, and another social index. These fall severely. What did Venezuela do from 2019 forward? Can you see the next slide, please? Trump is now applying maximum pressure. He thinks that if Chevron leaves, we will not do well. He's wrong, because Venezuela is strong. There is a phenomenon of transubstantiation. This is a philosophical term I like. They modified the way people saw things. When the oil industry leaves, we need to start producing other things. Before that, when there was a bonanza, when we also had currency exchange restrictions, we had inflation that had 2 digits all the time. In 2023, the inflation was the lowest in 41 years. It's extraordinary. You can see there, at the end of 2022, we were stable and growing. Obviously, yes, Chevron leaves, and that has impacts on oil production. That's fresh money that comes into the country, that it will affect us. But we're not in the same position that we used to be. As I said, there's a transformation of the substance of Venezuelans. The economy changed, agents changed, and we started to see the world without the dependency on oil. So beforehand, with riches, there were only 2 brands of flour in Venezuela, industrial brands of that. Now there are more than 10. So with the sanctions and without the income, we have had more of a percentage of the production of our food. It is a miracle, and we're very willing to show the world how to do this. They're doing the same thing to other countries. They're trying to do it through tariffs. And we have a virtuous formula with the people in front in resistance. We were able to defeat an inflation that was the 4th largest in the world We're talking about the maximum interannual inflation was more than 304,000%. These numbers are not seen, not even in war countries that are going through wars. We need to export this feat. This is another of our independence fights. Without the help of anyone, we were able to achieve this. There were some supposed ally countries. However, this new substance in Venezuela is marvelous because it doesn't tie us to the conditions we used to have. If Chevron wants to leave, then they should leave. We will continue to construct an economic structure where agents have a productive vocation. Venezuela is a different country. And now, with all our tools, will succeed. I don't know if I have any more time left.
2 minutes if you want to wrap up.
How should I close? What are our expectations? Well, it was a country that was able to go through all of these difficulties. The sanctions on Venezuela are so peculiar that some people compare them with Iran, but really they're not the same. The ones that were applied to us are different. And I'll just give one data point to those that deny that our sanctions are, when they say that they're comparable to Iran's. There's no other country that has received a fake president. And this is in the pandemic, we were denied, let's say, humanitarian aid of the amount of $5,000 million because they said that they didn't know who was president. Nonetheless, the Venezuelan government said, okay, use an intermediary that can send the vaccines if you think we're going to steal them. And they still said, no, you will not receive the funds. That's the point that they reached. And they're also so peculiar because we depended the effects of sanctions. There are some studies that say that the closer that the sanctioning country is, you will receive more severe impacts. Well, Venezuela used to have the United States as the largest consumer of our product. They used to buy 620,000 million barrels a day. They were our first commercial ally, and we were very close to them. That made the sanctions, which were very different to that of Iran. And because the US knew that we were very dependent on oil. I think really Trump, what he's doing with the tariffs on the Venezuelan country and threatening to retrieve Chevron. Notice that in a couple of days, the deadline will come, but really he dragged it over for a month. I think what he wants to do is to steal in the way that they did in 2019. It's obvious that they're very angry because he was left as a very big fool and he's isolated. The opposition, as you know here, is also terrible. according to my numbers, approximately we're talking about 15,000 children that would be alive today without sanctions. So I don't think things will really change if the maximum pressure comes to be, because we are a different people and we've overcome many things. I think my image is now fixed. Sorry about that. Thank you, everyone. Good evening.
That's quite all right. Thank you, Yosmer. Thanks for that snapshot of the impact of unilateral coercive measures, sanctions on Venezuela, and Venezuela's response, and kind of an overview. We look forward to more questions as the webinar goes on, and thank you again, everyone's patience also for some technical issues. It happens when we're zooming in folks, especially from other continents. So appreciate your patience. Next, we have joining us Cira Pascual Marquina. I hear kind of like a loud airplane sound. Does anyone else hear that? Is that just me? If anyone has their mic on, maybe. Thank you. Cira Pascual Marquina is a popular educator at the Pluriuniversidad Patria Grande, which is El Panal Commune's educational initiative. She is also a writer at Venezuela Analysis and co-producer and co-host of the Marxist education program Escuela de Cuadros. Pascual Marquina, or Cira, is a member of the International Communal Democracy Network, is co-author with Chris Gilbert of the book series Resistencia Comunal Frente a Bloqueo Imperialista from the Observatorio Venezolano Ante-Bloqueo, and the book Venezuela, The Present as Struggle, Voices from the Bolivarian Revolution from Monthly Review Press. Thank you, Cira, for joining us here today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Alison. Thank you to VSN, and thank you to everybody who is there listening to what we have to say about, well, the impact of the U.S. blockade on the people of Venezuela, but also how the people of Venezuela resist and build a better world in a context that's really a war context. Really, what the people of Venezuela are living is a war without bombs. You all listened to Yosmer. He gave a good overall view of the impact of the blockade. And so I think that our objective with this section, as I was requested, is to look at how people are building a new world in the midst of the blockade, how people are impacted in their daily lives by the US blockade, but also how they are building a better world, which we call the commune. So basically for us, communes are our pathway to self-emancipation. The communes are basically Chavez's legacy in terms of how to build a socialist future. Everybody knows 2014, 2015, the Obama decree and what that brought on to the people of Venezuela. By now, we have more than 1,000 unilateral coercive measures, sanctions, secondary sanctions, a financial blockade. It's endless, basically. Also, you saw in the graphs, but I want to highlight this because it's really extraordinary. So Venezuela is a country that has historically been an oil-producing country. It has a capitalist rentier economy. In 2012, in Venezuela, the production was 3 million barrels per day, more or less. By 2020, we were down to 300,000 barrels per day. And right now we are picking up back to around 900,000 barrels per day. The impact of these sanctions, of the unilateral coercive measure, it's been extraordinary. Import of medicines, agricultural inputs, even gasoline. And you might ask, why did the people of Venezuela have no gasoline when Venezuela is an oil-producing country? Well, we couldn't get diluents either. Tens of thousands of deaths, in this war without bombs. Why? Well, I think we can look at two reasons, right? They will say that we have an authoritarian government, that we do not have a democracy, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's important to understand really what what our project is about, because Venezuela's project is actually about democracy, but about substantive democracy, not about the restrictive liberal democracy that the collective West tries to impose around the world. And that's really the democracy that serves the interests of capital. That is very important to say this. Like there's the restrictive liberal democracy imposed that the West tries to impose is the democracy of capitalism, of the capitalist class. So we have another proposal. Since 2005, 2006, Chavez begins to talk about socialism of the 21st century, a socialism that we will be built from here, but that of course has to reorganize social relations as a whole. So really, if we have on the one hand this very restrictive democracy that actually right now is taking out its mask and it's coming as fascist as it is with Trump, we have another kind of democracy. We have a much more profound democracy, a substantive democracy. And my argument is that in the hardest of times, this substantive, profoundly radical, revolutionary democracy actually flourished in the worst of times. So some of you may have heard that in 2012, in a speech, Chavez said, comuna or nada, commune or nothing. He was reflecting about the options that the world was giving us. On the one hand, what capitalism, imperialism offers is absolutely nothing. And on the other hand, the commune offers the reorganization of society, building a society based on the needs of the society itself, a sovereign society, a society where people can take decisions collectively about how to organize their lives. The most extraordinary thing, and Alison was mentioning this in the opening, that we have been working on a collection of books with Observatorio Antibloqueo, and later perhaps I can share the address with you so that you can download. You can also download them in English, the articles, at the Venezuelanalysis website. But this work that we are doing with the Observatorio Antibloqueo has actually brought us to some 15 communes around the country. And what we have seen, and mind you, the objective of this research is to understand how the blockade impacts the people, the working people of Venezuela, the people in the communes. And the objective of the project is specifically that. But what we found is that when we went to communes, people did want to tell us that they had suffered because they didn't have medicines, that they had suffered because they didn't have enough food, that they had suffered because they didn't have gasoline, that their production went down because they couldn't get inputs. Communards tell you that, but communards, the people of Venezuela who are building a new society, actually are far more interested in telling you that they are not victims, that they are subjects of transformation, that they assume themselves as subjects that have the capacity to, in the middle of this war without bombs, build a better future. And they don't just imagine this, they actually do it. This is the extraordinary thing about Venezuelan communes. So what is a commune, you might ask? Well, I cannot go in depth into what is a commune. Actually, if anybody is interested in learning more about communes, I recommend that you read this book. It's in English, Commune or Nothing, by Chris Gilbert, monthly review. And since I cannot go in depth into how commune organizes, I will highlight two things. First of all, communes are profoundly linked to that idea of participative and protagonic democracy that Chavez began to work on around 1991, 1992, in a very wonderful short book that I recommend that you read, that is called The Blue Book. So the idea of a new kind of a democracy that would be not limited to representative democracy, that would go beyond, far beyond representative or liberal democracy, is at the core of the Bolivarian process. So that would be one important thing to understand. When Chavez begins to talk about communes, which should be linked to communal councils, so communes, Chavez begins to talk about communes in 2009, but actually in 2006, we are already building direct democracy spaces, which we call communal councils. And in these direct democracy spaces, people actually take decisions about, what are their main problems. The people know best than anyone else what their main problems are, and the state is obliged to take into account what the people in the communal councils, these organizations that were built, territorial organizations that were built first around 2006. But in 2009, the proposal of the commune comes around, and so I would say that the commune walks on two legs. This is how I like to explain it. On the one hand, is substantive democracy, participative and protagonic democracy, assembly-based democracy, not representative democracy. But then there's another leg to the communes, and the communes are actually the space where we will see the reorganization of society in economic terms. So a commune is to have means of production. We live, we all know, in a capitalist society. Chavez would say it. President Nicolas Maduro reminds us also that we still live in a capitalist society, and as the capitalist society that we live in, many of the means of production are in hands of the capitalists, so they are in the hands of a minority. That is called private property. In Venezuela, our strategic project for the transformation of society, which we call the communes, is based on communal property. What is communal property? Communal property means that everybody in a territory, for instance, I'm a part of El Panal commune in 23 de Enero, everybody in my commune is collectively the owner of a textile factory that is in our commune. And the surplus that's produced from that factory goes to the whole of the commune. The commune collectively in an assembly decides what to produce and what to do with the surplus. So this is a profoundly democratic exercise, but it's not just an exercise. It's actually a form of profoundly transforming society, of building a self-emancipated, substantively democratic and sovereign society. And I think that basically the commune is the center of the new society, of the society that we are dreaming of for the future. But it turns out that communes already exist right now. And I want to highlight something. Not only are communes wonderful in that we imagine that one day we will live in socialism. Communes in the territories are small spaces of socialism. But more than that, when we are thinking about the blockade, when we are thinking about the sanctions, because I have gone to dozens of communes, and I am a communard myself, I have learned that actually communes are capable of giving answers to the problems that the blockade has brought to the people of Venezuela. And how, you will ask? Well, for instance, many of you will know about the club system, which is a system which, through the government, each family receives a bag food, so that people do not go hungry. This began a few years ago in the worst of the blockade. It was an institutional response to the needs of the people. But actually, the club began in many communes, in my commune, in comunas in Yaracuy, in communes in Barlovento, in different places, communes that actually had means of production, destined part of their surplus to buying food in order to make sure that people had food in their communes. Or in the worst of times, in 2020, the blockade plus the pandemic, people actually didn't have money. Some humble people, some poor people didn't have money to bury their loved ones. And actually communes use some of the surplus to bury the loved ones of people who were living in the commune. So what I want to highlight is that communes open a window into a better future. But in the present, they are actually spaces that are capable of giving responses to the people of Venezuela. They are extraordinary spaces. There's a lot to learn from communes. Of course, the last few years have been very, very difficult in Venezuela, but the last few years have also been extraordinary. And this is actually kind of like walks hand on hand with something that Yosmer was saying, is that really the people of Venezuela have been fighting and have been resisting in a very creative way. And I would add to that the people of Venezuela, that we have been building a new world in the worst of conditions. I think we can, I do not know how much time I have been talking. If you can give me
2 more minutes.
a clue.
2 more
What's
minutes.
that?
2
I
more.
have 2 more minutes. Okay. So one thing that I like to always say about the communes, and that actually kind of like links well with resistance to the blockade, is that all societies, of course, have elements of solidarity and commonality. But the people, the culture of Venezuela is actually a profoundly solidarious and cooperative society. And this has been very important in terms of the resistance to the US blockade and also in terms of the building of the communes. I always like to tell this anecdote, and that's that the worst insult that you can give to a Venezuelan after insulting their mother is to tell them that they are pichirri. And pichirri means that they are ungenerous, that they are not solidarious. So that kind of like opens a window into kind of like the, I don't know what I would say, cultural profile of Venezuelans, without essentializing, of course, but a cultural trait of Venezuelan people. There are other elements that actually we can find their roots in indigenous communities, in indigenous communities that actually built and lived in communes. Um, one of the most recent visits that we've done to communes was to Wotija communes in Amazonas. And those communes are communes long before the Bolivarian Revolution, and of course before the Spanish colonizers. Those communes are communes. They have been living communally. Those communities have living communally for a very long time, for hundreds or thousands of years. What's interesting, if you come to Caracas, which is not an indigenous per se space, is that there are elements of indigenous culture that are very much alive and that actually build towards the commune, and that actually also offer an answer in terms of the resistance to the US blockade. And I will mention just two: the callapa, which is when the people in the barrio, they have a problem because there's a street that's dirty or whatever, and they say, well, on Thursday night we are all going to go out and collectively clean the street. That's called the callapa, collectively solving problems. It's very much part of the culture, of the Venezuelan culture. And then the other one is the sancocho, which is um, you again, in your neighborhood, in your barrio, you bring out a big pot and people start to bring a little bit of chicken and some vegetables, etc., and you throw it all on in a pot and you make a collective meal. Why am I telling you all this? Well, because those two things, this element of cooperation, these elements of cooperation, of solidarity, have been important to resist the US blockade, of course, and they are also important in the building of a new world, which is what Venezuelans who are working in communes are doing as we speak. And here I will say the last thing for now. Communes are not isolated spaces. Communes have to build amongst each other. And of course, among each other, they have to, Chavez said something very important, that a socialist island in a capitalist world will fail for sure. So that's one thing about communes. And also, communes have to work with the government, and the government has to work with the communes, because communes are the space from which we will transform society. And most recently, actually not so recently, already for a year, the government has been promoting consults, communal consults, in which the people in each commune, in the more than 4,000 communes, and in the more than 5,000 communal circuits that there are, communal circuits being potential communes. So in all these spaces, people are going every 3 months approximately to vote for what are the issues that they need to resolve immediately. People organizing in assemblies, they define what their priorities are, they go to a vote, and people themselves solve their problems through funding that comes through the government. So when we think about the communes, we have to think about them not as I love the Zapatistas, but our project is not the Zapatista project, because our project is a project that actually has the communal project, I'm saying, that actually has the aspiration to transform the whole of society. And to transform the whole of society, we have to do it with the government. We cannot, like if we are going to develop new means of production, if we are going to build new means of production, we need support from the government. If we have to solve, I don't know, a lighting problem in our community, we need to get support from the government. But it is us, it is the communards, the ones who prioritize and decide how to solve the problems that we face. So this is the last thing that I wanted to say about communes, because sometimes communes are identified with the wonderful exercises of commune making in the late 60s and early 70s in the United States. And indeed, our communes share something, that in the sense that they look for a better world, but they also have their own particularities. So I think I will leave it there, because I'm sure I've been talking too long.
Thank you, Cira. No worries at all. We wanted to, of course, have a fruitful time for discussion. There's been some questions. There's 4 currently in the Q&A, so I'll give Yosmer and you, Cira, time to review the questions before we get to them and make just a few announcements. But thank you for bringing the perspective from the communes in responding to the US sanctions and attacks. I think it's very important as solidarity activists, the majority of us online right now joining from North America, that yes, Venezuela has confronted the sanctions. Venezuela is making gains economically, and from the grassroots is elevating the quality of life of everyone, of poor people in Venezuela. But I think that doesn't mean we discount the very real fact of the horrible impact of sanctions on people's ability to access food, medicine, healthcare. Really, it has been deep, and there are many people that have been killed. And sanctions are an act of war, as you said, a war without bombs. So I do think that as we're talking about Venezuela's resistance and powerful response to U.S. imperialist-led attacks, that we don't let that, we are not forgetting our responsibility as people in North America to organize, educate, mobilize, unite against these attacks, and make sure that we are campaigning in solidarity with Venezuela. So on that, for announcements, I did want to share the Venezuelanalysis has just put together a new infographic, which also describes some of what Yosmer talked about, which is sanctions, the history of sanctions against the Venezuelan oil industry. That's very useful for putting it in a timeline. It's just useful to see it all together of that aspect of US attacks and where we are at today. So I've put in the chat the link to that. I also will be sharing in the chat a few useful recent articles from members and organizers of the Venezuela Solidarity Network, who are often writing in progressive websites about Venezuela. And I will also put in the chat, Cira, where you just ended, which was talking about the communal elections generally, but also happening now. Cira and I both spoke at a webinar regarding building people's power in Venezuela, organized by a member of the Venezuela Solidarity Network in Britain, Rock Around the Blockade. And there's a collection of videos of our talks that describe more about this communal elections process and where that fits within the Bolivarian Revolution and Venezuela's response to sanctions. I also just wanted to say that the next Venezuela Solidarity Monthly picket and online event is going to be a report back from Venezuela, because many folks will be going to Venezuela for elections taking place. It is the elections of governors and of the National Assembly at the end of this month. So the next webinar, which will be the last Tuesday of the month of May, will be a report back from people, many of whom might still be on the ground in Venezuela, which is the best way to observe the exchange with people in Venezuela, what Cira and Yosmer have been speaking about, because seeing it for yourself is really something quite different. So thank you again, Yosmer, Cira, for your words. Yosmer, if you are able to talk, if you could turn on your camera. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you are still there. Very good to see you. We're getting some more questions come in, but
Sí.
I will start. That's with the first one, perhaps with the first
No,
one.
yo no las puedo ver.
About the
Ajá, la primera.
Yeah, that's okay. About the parallel market, the dollar rose at about the same time as the US revoked the Chevron license. Is there a relation between the maximum pressure campaign and the value of the parallel dollar in Venezuela? So, of course, the question in the question with that is about the what this person is referring to as a parallel dollar. Maybe Yosmer and Cira both, if you want to talk about the impact of sanctions and how it has, I guess, irregularized or how that impacts currency in Venezuela and people's kind of spending power. And if you want to briefly describe this concept, I think the person was referring to of a parallel dollar, really a parallel exchange rate that exists in Venezuela today and how that impacts prices. So that's a lot of questions, but Yosmer, do you feel prepared to address that question within a question?
Well, up until March, I was in the board of the central bank. We did see differences in the exchange rate. What's a parallel exchange rate? Well, agents, economic agents create a price. This is something that happens in different parts of the world. It's not a product of the sanctions. What is a product of the sanctions is a loss of revenue. If you have that, you have no US currency in the economy, and as the offer decreases, the price increases because there's a higher demand. So this is an alternate and illegal exchange rate. It's part of the maximum pressure campaign. They've done this before. We've defeated it, and we will do so again. The president has decreed an economic emergency in order to contain this abnormal exchange rate. There are some measures that have been recommended, and I can speak to those.
Okay, sorry, wrong channel. I'm sorry about that. So what I feel is that we need to make this formula virtuous. We applied a recipe in 2018, 2019, 2020. These were political policy, economic policies implemented by President Maduro. Who do Venezuelans blame for the economic situation? Because they blame the government. And this is the idea of the American government. But what do I want to make clear here? There is no way to do good economic management without resources. And resources do not come in because there was an embargo on oil and the production of oil was affected. So the government is not to blame. But if we're going to blame the government, then we also have to blame them for all the positive changes and the growth in the last years. I understand that there was an important measure that had to do with restricting credit or redirecting credit to the communes. When the Minister of Communes, I talked about creating a bank for communes. And this bank, which is an alternative construction, it is something different. The commune banks they should be able to do currency exchanges and everything. I mentioned the creation of also a central bank for communes, replicating the idea of a central bank as an administrator of all the resources of the communes so as to give credit to communes. And so we advised credit policy to be extended to the communes. In 2018, many banks were giving credit to buy dollars, and this made the parallel dollar increase, the rate of the parallel dollar increased. So banks used to give credit for the purchase of dollars, and that had an impact. So an alternative to this is to give credit for inputs for production, not for an element that can pressure the exchange rate. Thank you.
So I don't know if I should go on that one. I mean, it is, I can tell you that the impact of the situation over the past couple of months has been really, it's been rough for the working class. But I actually think that there were some questions that were actually going towards the issue of communes that maybe I should address in the chat. There was one question that I think it's an important question. It's about how communes, as I understood it, it was about how communes cooperate among themselves. Is that correct? Is that how the question was going? Well, correct me if that's not how it was going. But I think this is a key question because, as I said before, while we are very inspired by the Zapatistas, by the ECLN, our project is a project that aspires to transform the whole country, the whole nation, even the whole state. And actually, right now, as we speak, we are going into a process to reform our constitution so that the commune enters the constitution. This is a process that is opening up and that will be picking up speed in the next couple of months. So the commune is going to be centered in our constitution. And why? Because, well, basically the commune is the pathway to transform our society, and not only to build a more just society internally, but also to build sovereignty. And actually, I'm kind of picking up on what Yosmer was saying here. It's like communes do not produce in terms of capital accumulation. They do not. We do not produce capital flight to the north, as often happens with the capitalist class in the global south, not only in Venezuela. Communes actually produce to satisfy the needs of the people. And if you produce to satisfy the needs of the people, you're also strengthening the sovereignty of the country. But that's not actually answering the question. The question is, how do communes cooperate among themselves? And I will tell you about an exercise that we are doing in my commune with other communes. My commune is called El Panal Commune, and we are. I'm also militante. I never know how to say this in English. An activist in an organization that's called Fuerza Patriótica Alexis Vive. It's a Chavista, Marxist, and Guevarist organization. And we are an urban commune in 23 de Enero, in a working class, very combative barrio in the city. And we are working with rural communes and spaces that are still in the process of communalizing. For instance, to bring in food into the city, into our communes, into our commune and in other spaces that we work as an organization in a project that we call Campaña Admirable. The Campaña Admirable, the admirable campaign, that sounds horrible. It actually is a historical reference to Bolivar. And in the Campaña Admirable, basically, we work with rural communities to bring food to the city, but we do it in a planned way. It's not mediated by intermediators, like campesinos, people who grow food. They get super exploited by the intermediaries. And of course, working class people in the cities also get exploited by the intermediaries. So we are kind of like working with rural communes to bring the food here. But of course, it's not just about bringing the food here. It's also about us going there and learning how they produce and how they organize. It's about helping each other build more robust communes. Because, like our commune is actually, I mean, I love my commune, but it's an urban commune. It has limits. Rural communes have limits too. So we have to work in a cooperative manner to jump forward, to really become stronger and more robust. So that would be one example that I could give you about how to interlink communes. But there are other initiatives. For instance, there's a block of especially rural, although small, or maybe a couple of smaller urban communes, but mostly rural communes are a bunch of them are joined in a project that's called the Common Art Union, which is a sister organization, an organization that we respect a great deal from my commune. So there are different exercises that look at how to interlink communes, because again, we cannot stay isolated. There's a friend who says that we have to be very clear that our project is not about making Snorf socialism. Snorf, do you say that? Like the little bull, the little creature? Okay. So our thing is not about making a Snorf socialism, say, making some like little exercises of socialism here and there. No, no. When we talk about socialism and when we talk about the communes, we talk about a strategic project that's to change the whole of society. So those would be some elements that I would like to give in terms of how to interlink. I don't know if there were any other questions that related to the communes.
Someone was wondering just about the communal projects, the ones that have been voted on over the last year at different communal elections, if they're successful, the projects being implemented, which perhaps you have some personal experience with, or if you've just to the sentiment.
Well, yes, the consuls have been very efficient in many ways. They've been very efficient because they are, the Venezuelan state is not always efficient. In general, states tend to be rather inefficient in the global north and in the global south. There's bureaucracy, and there are instances also of corruption here, like everywhere else. When you channel resources without the mediation of, like without the many mediations that institutions have, and when it is people who define what their problems are and how they are going to solve them, and they receive the funding and they themselves solve the problems, that's a tremendously efficient way of solving the problems that people face, which are many. So first I want to make that pitch, I guess, about the communal councils, because they turn out to be very, very efficient. Communal councils also help spaces that are kind of like beginning to communalize, and they promote, they kind of like, they are an incentive for communes that are more incipient, more beginning, communes that are beginning to organize. They are an incentive for them to go on organizing. The kind of projects that have been in my commune and many other communes, I follow up communes around the country. I can tell you that in my commune, the first council came out with an ambulance, and we have an ambulance that belongs to the commune right now. In the second council, it was fixing some sidewalks that were in very bad shape, and those have been solved. In many communes, for instance, I was just very recently, actually over the weekend, last week, I was in an Afro-descendant commune in the Sur del Lago, a beautiful commune that's in Palmarito. And in that commune, people have been putting the resources of each consulate into building more classrooms for their high school. In other areas, they have been fixing roads or fixing problems with electricity. As you can imagine, a problem like a country like ours that has been under a very brutal blockade, basically for a decade, there are many problems. So the councils are very efficient in terms of solving the problems. The people know best than anybody else. Like no bureaucrat knows like us, what our problems in the barrio are. So in that sense, they are very efficient, and they are efficient economically for in terms of the resources that reach the communes, and they are efficient in terms of mobilizing and activating grassroots democracy. And grassroots democracy is what the commune is really about.
Thank you, Cira. And I want to get to a question about food sovereignty in Venezuela, which I think is really important and possibly a future webinar topic. But just also, someone's wondering about the reaction among the Venezuelan people to Trump's attacks on Venezuelan migrants. So, Cira, do you have any observations you could share about that? And then I'll ask Yosmer.
What can I say? I mean, it's fascism. I have no doubt. I mean, I guess this is a debate within the left, but I have no doubt that we are seeing the awakening of a fascist regime in the United States, and I am very concerned about the people of the United States, and I send my solidarity, especially to the migrant and racialized communities and working class people in general. But of course, the people of Venezuela who are suffering these. I want to highlight something. It's true that there's a lot of Venezuelan migrants in the U.S., and I want to say that actually people in Venezuela were never pendiente. I don't know how to say this. Were never leaving aside a very small kind of like upper middle class sector of Venezuelan society. Venezuelans were never very interested in going to the United States because the Bolivarian Revolution has been extraordinary, because these are people that believe in their country. Of course, like every migrant believes in their community and in their country. What the bottom line here is that Venezuelan migrants in the United States were forced to go to the United States. And they were forced to go to the United States by the US blockade, which is criminal, violent. It's the worst. I mean, the worst words describe it. So that's what I have to say about the situation with these migrants. Of course, these migrants hurt a lot to us, but the situation of all migrants around the world, like we live in a very unjust world, and I think we have to, as those of us who are here are particularly concerned about Venezuelan migrants, but we also have to see this in a holistic situation. And the global north is generating the situations for people from the global south to go to their countries, because the situations that are imposed in global south countries, including our own, including Venezuela, are really dramatic. So that's what I would like to highlight there.
Thank you, Cira. Yosmer, if you're there as a Venezuelan, do you have anything you'd like to share about Trump's attacks on Venezuelan migrants?
Can you hear me? I just sent a link for a very good article from an economist that isn't a leftist, who uses academy and science for logical things like what's happening here with migrants. There are people in the US, one of them called Ricardo Hausman. He wrote an article that called Trump to increase the pressure and accelerate this fascist topic. Cira spoke very well on this. I definitely think that what she said is correct. I second it. Before, there didn't used to be gasoline for ambulances. I should also point that out. People couldn't be transported to hospitals. But sorry, coming back to migrants, this right-leaning economist went against Hausman because Hausman said to Trump, if he didn't increase the sanctions, then people would go to the US. What he's saying is increase the sanctions so that Venezuelans die of starvation and therefore they don't go to the US. Imagine these Nazis that call themselves economists. Obviously, if you bombard a country like they did Venezuela, people flee. It's a similar effect that wars have. Migrations that you can see in Gaza. We should condemn that every day, the genocide in Gaza. People migrate because they have bad conditions. But these Nazi economists, what they're saying is that that Trump should increase the sanctions. What I want to say is that migration in Venezuela is an effect of the sanctions. This situation was created by the United States, and that created a problem for the region, but it was initially created by the US. Venezuelan migrants left to find jobs. And this created also a phobia against Venezuelans. That has to be reverted. Given that we're having prosperity now, people are coming back. We will receive everyone with our arms open. We need them. We need everyone here. They will come and we will construct the country that we need. We are transforming reality, as Cira said. This isn't a smart reality. This is a Bolivarian project that will continue in time. We have, in one hand, the project of Bolivar, and we are perfecting it. We're coming to a better Venezuela.
Thank you. I'll also thank you for bringing up as well the ongoing U.S.-Israeli genocide against Palestinians and against Gaza. I know that many people and supporters of Venezuela are very active and involved in that struggle against the U.S.-Israeli genocide, and it's important to recognize Venezuela's solidarity with the people of Palestine. The protests in Venezuela in support of Palestine, like protests in Venezuela in solidarity with Venezuelan migrants who are under attack from Trump, are one of many mass mobilizations in Venezuela that take place and, of course, receive no coverage from major Western capitalist media. And so knowing about those protests and solidarity from people in Venezuela, glimpses of the photos that we get through, Venezuelanalysis social media or other social media accounts is really crucial to keep sharing because those are not the voices, of course, interviewed here in Canada on the CBC or CNN in the United States or any of these major media. The last question I wanted to bring is coming from the perspective of Venezuela's food self-sufficiency. I don't believe either of you are experts in this, so if we need the details to come at a future webinar, I think it's an excellent topic for a future webinar. But Venezuela has made great strides towards food self-sufficiency, as we've learned when we've been there recently, under the conditions of a hybrid war, of course. And perhaps, as the question says, perhaps no other state that was dependent on oil rents has been so successful in food sovereignty? How is this achieved? What percent of the food is currently imported, and to what extent is food production by small farmers as opposed to large corporate farms? And how is the cooperation from both of these sectors accomplished? So that is a multi-layered question. And again, I think the bulk of an answer would be an excellent topic and an important topic for a webinar. Cira, do you have any comments that you could add to this question?
Yes, I could not give the full answer to it, but I can give a few tips perhaps. I think that most of the fruits and vegetables that are consumed in Venezuela are produced by campesinos, not by large corporate agribusiness. This is important because it actually comes with a challenge for us as in terms of Venezuela. The challenge that we face, that campesinos face, is that campesinos actually face the problem of intermediaries. And that is a problem that we recognize from the grassroots. Every commune has an objective of being productive, right? Of course, in an urban commune, we are not going to be producing large quantities of corn or whatever, but we still think about how to build, how to grow the production. And when we think about how to grow the production, which is still like we are not at 100%, so it is still an objective. We have to think about how to overcome the issue of the intermediaries. And I think that if you are interested in looking at the issue of food sovereignty from a grassroots perspective, maybe the most interesting work that you should look at, and it's also an organized experience, is Pueblo a Pueblo, people to people. It's a grassroots organization that works with rural and urban communities. And we also, in El Panal Commune, have our own experience that I was talking about before, which actually also connects, brings down the wall between the countryside and the city. That wall that capitalism builds is brought down by the communards. So those are just kind of like some hopeful pointers. Is that one, that it is campesinos who produce most of the fruits and vegetables that we eat, but that doesn't mean that we do not have challenges, because while the big agro-industry doesn't permeate the Venezuelan food production, like say in Brazil, we still face challenges with the intermediaries, the capitalist intermediaries. That would be one thing. And the other thing is that there are actually exercises towards food sovereignty from communes and from grassroots organizations that are very efficient and very important. And I think that maybe if you do a next seminar that focuses on food sovereignty, I would think that maybe talking with the folks of Pueblo a Pueblo would be very good. I can help with that contact if you don't have it.
Thank you, Cira. I agree. So I'll see. Actually, we'll move towards the wrap up, if that's okay. Yosmer, if you have any comments about food sovereignty you want to add in your closing comments, go ahead. But would you like to make a few closing comments for today's webinar?
Yes, I will show. I don't know how to change the camera here. Sorry to improvise, but look, this brand of flour didn't exist when we had a GDP of more than $300,000 million. I'm not doing any publicity for this brand, but this is a new Venezuelan product that came out of this new economic logic. This is another brand of Venezuelan coffee. It says here that it was made in Trujillo. And this other Venezuelan coffee, another brand, and it says here in the back, origin. You can't see it very well, sorry. But it says here, Venezuela. Can you see it? Well, we are producing a lot. Let me bring the camera back. Sorry for the improvisation, but we're Venezuelan. And this is the way we are. We reconstruct ourselves and we do everything to succeed. So 98% of food is being produced here. There's a product. Sorry for giving this new news here. That there's a brand called Hecho en Comune, made in communes. Venezuela is a miracle in many ways, and the food sovereignty miracle is also something that needs to be talked about. We need to export that experience to the world.
Thank you, Yosmer. So I think, Cira, did you have any closing comments you would like to make?
Just thank you to everybody for coming here, and to you, to Alison, and to the folks who organized the VSN for organizing this space. For us from Venezuela, it's actually very important that our voices get heard, because of course the mainstream media does not make our voices heard. But it is also important to listen back and to learn back from all of you. Like this is kind of like almost like a lugar común. I don't know how to say this in English, like a commonplace, like we are grateful for your solidarity, for your support, like everybody in the left who's supportive of the Bolivarian process, and who speaks out against the blockade. But also solidarity should be going in two directions, no? So we want to also express our solidarity. I want to express my solidarity with the people of the United States, especially because these are hard times, and you have your brothers and your sisters here in Venezuela. It is it's going to be a few years of a struggle. Things are not looking good, but you have people who are with you, who will be solidarious with you, and who, if needed, will fight with you arm to arm against fascism, and of course against imperialism always.
Thank you, Cira. Yosmer? Any- Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Cira. Thank you to everyone. Thank you, Cira, for saying the truth about the people. Things about the commune are beautiful. I know Robert, please send my love. And my son, that commune, the network of solidarity should receive our eternal thanks because of what you've done for our resistance process and our refoundation process. To us, it's very beautiful that you do this, and we know that these tears are coming down for our heroic process. Thank you very much to the participants. I haven't published a whole lot of things because I was in the central bank, but I will be publishing now. I will be co-author with the rapporteur about the sanctions. You have my email there. You can request any information that you need. You can receive my investigations, my research about how we have succeeded. A strong hug to all.
Un abrazo fuerte. Yes, a strong hug, everyone. You will start receiving an invitation to upgrade to join the webinar as a panelist, and that will allow you to turn on your camera. So go ahead and accept if you have the ability to turn on your camera now. But that will close off today's webinar. It's just nice to see each other if you're in a place where you can. That will close off today's webinar. If you haven't received an invitation and you can turn on your camera, raise your hand as Leonardo is just demonstrating there. Thank you. The next Venezuela Solidarity Network webinar, as I mentioned, will be a report back from Venezuela's May election, Tuesday, May 27th, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. There's no registration link for that yet, but keep your eyes peeled and write it down in your calendars if you can. I also want to give a very big thank you to our interpreters for today, who've done an excellent and always difficult job. We have Mercedes and Giselle, who have been on that. So thank you so much for your support today. And thank you to our speakers, Yosmer and Cira, for joining us for this important discussion. I see some folks have turned on their cameras. I know some people did have to leave a bit early, but we do like to see each other for a minute and chance. It's just a nice way to close off our monthly picket actions. I'm going to figure out how to unblur my background so that you can properly read my sign. Yeah, I got it. Thank you to all of our tech support, to Natalia, to Michelle, to Teddy, to everyone who helped build this action. We will continue organizing these monthly events, and I know that the recordings are also been very useful for folks. There'll be more links in the recordings and in the chat. Just try and save those before we close it, so people can continue sharing about these important discussions on Venezuela, the impact of U.S. policy against Venezuela, both within the United States against Venezuelan migrants and abroad. Okay, this is our group that's able to join together in this space right now. A few of the faces that we spoke together. Let's say it loud and clear. U.S. hands off Venezuela.
U.S. hands off Venezuela.
U.S. hands off Venezuela.
U.S.
hands
off
off
Venezuela.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you again next month. Que viva Venezuela. Long live Venezuela.
Que
Viva
viva.
Chavez.
Que viva.